welcome back. This is Royal O'Brien, and we're here at TwitchCon. And we've got with us today David Cusatis over here. And what we've done a lot of times during today, we've talked about how you're actually able to give some feedback and communicate and really become part of the process. And this is where RFCs have come up. But, you know, it's kind of understanding how all this has come around. So instead of kind of hitting points that we've been doing all day, we're going to find out the real source. So I guess my first question here is the big one. How exactly did this all come about? How did RFCs come about?
Yeah, totally. So RFCs are like generally pretty well-known process in a lot of different open source projects and communities, where it allows the maintainers and developers of the projects to receive proposed new features and proposed changes, and allow the community to comment on them and give feedback on the new things that they would like to add.
So, I mean, what kind of what kind of an impact does this really have that you see in the cycle?
Oh, it's like an incredible impact, actually. Like, we've gotten feedback that has sparked conversations internally that have pivoted products, proposed new products even. So it's definitely a very we definitely listen to every single piece of feedback we get.
Yeah, I will add, because it's happened with some, I think one RFC and any other feedback we get. I love when there's like one piece of feedback we get from a developer, and it ends up being like this huge meeting with all of the engineers and be like, what is the right way to do this? What's the strategy? And I just take a step back at those moments where it's like, this meeting started with a tweet or something.
Yeah.
From the developer, right?
Yeah.
It's like, it's amazing. We are listening to that feedback, and this is part of that.
Well, I guess it's kind of important because if you take a look at all the stuff like how it's being developed internally, if you really weren't listening, it would be like you're living in a bubble.
Right, totally. And that's what we were doing before with extensions. We previously launched and like built some features, and then we were like, well, let's get some feedback, because we want to hear how the pain that developers are facing and how we can mitigate that as best as we can, because we only know from talking to people in like events like this, and that doesn't happen all that often. So having this like back and forth conversation definitely is super important for us.
Or only knowing or thinking of a few use cases where obviously the community can think of so many more.
Right, yeah, everybody's workflow is different, and everybody does things differently, and I think it's super important to consider those different cases for when you're building products.
Do you see that kind of impacting the life cycle of the product itself? Kind of like you started out with a product feature and then you put it out, you saw some of the feedback come back to you, you made some changes. Do you see that loop around again a couple times in RFCs?
Yeah, you'll see it a little bit in RFCs where, so for example of this is our RFC about the chat capabilities. We got that was like our most talked about RFC. We got a bunch of comments and feedback from that. And
what was that? What was the?
Oh, right. Yeah. So the feedback was that what
was the RFC for? Sorry.
Before
we get into what the feedback was.
The RFC was for chat capabilities, which basically means allowing your extension to do things in chat, like post messages, pin messages, so on and so forth. Yeah. So there's a unique overlap there between chat and extensions. Everybody on Twitch knows the chat. Not so many people know the extensions piece of it, or like how to find them, how to interact with them. And if you have that ability to post in chat and pin messages and things like that, then that opens up new doors for interactivity that previously didn't exist, right?
Was it some of the confusion of people understanding when to use it, or was it just they noticed there was an overlap and somehow you've got to kind of address it? Like, what was? Yeah,
so the feedback specifically was around the rate limiting. So we only allow 4 messages per channel per extension. So just so we don't completely have an extension that blows up our systems, right? The feedback we got was that the rate limiting is incredibly limiting, right? So
no pun there, right?
Yeah, right. Beyond that actually drove an entire conversation around like different sort of solutions to that, right? Like, do we raise the rate limits? Do we build some sort of service to handle messages for developers? And if you're here in the convention, we have that on our extend our roadmap thing, so you can go vote for the message aggregation edge. Self-plug there. But yeah, that's like some of the stuff that we get from developers, and we're like, yeah, we hear you, and eventually, presumably, we'll write another RFC for that, and then everything will come sort of for full circle.
Does that kind of generate a dialogue? I mean, is it like the RFCs go out, and then there's kind of a conversation that's like a forum-based where not only are you talking internally, but you have people from the outside talking and throwing things that are continually evolving, or is it just kind of you take it in and run with it?
No, absolutely not. We definitely it's on the forum, so we see the replies, we reply back and be like, hey, yeah, we're definitely considering this, or thanks for this feedback, but there's a reason why we can't do that, or something like that. So we definitely go back and forth, and there's definitely back and forth conversation, and everybody from the team really gets involved. You have everybody replying on the forums, from managers to just engineers and product managers. Everybody is kind of has a piece in the conversation. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Right. I feel like this is that RFC you mentioned, the chat capabilities one, is very interesting because I feel like so many of our products to a certain point are very, I know it has a negative connotation, siloed, where it's like, but they're very specific in what their tasks are. Chat integrations are in this frame right here. Extensions are over here in the video or below. They didn't talk to each other.
Right.
And so it's like, great, okay, this is what you're doing extensions, this is what you're doing with chat. And then you were like, whoa, they're going to talk to each other?
Yeah.
And then there's passionate opinions on how those two should interact.
How it should work, what it should look like. There was definitely some feedback around the styling of the chat integration. So right now it's just like, a puzzle piece icon, and it says the extension name, and then it has the message they post. But people are like, it would be great if we can customize that a little bit, and
So are these RFCs really? Are they focused primarily on extensions? Are they also focused around bits and drops? Is it all of the entire ecosystem API? I mean, is it just kind of certain sections?
I think right now it's mostly extensions that have written the RFCs. But definitely we want to encourage. We found that they're so valuable that we definitely want to encourage people who are working on adjacent products, developer products, to also consider making those.
And Pat Sanchez was on earlier just talking about writing an RFC specifically for policies. So it goes even beyond product at this point. It's any feedback that we can get from the developers. This has proven to be a great channel to have a conversation.
Yeah, totally. Because across all of our developer products, ultimately our goal is to make developers' lives easier, make more money, etc. So the more feedback we can get and the more people we can get involved, the better we can build things.
Let's kind of walk just a minute, kind of the day in the life of one when it comes out. Let's just say for the heck of it, versioning.
Okay.
Right? So it goes out, right? What happens over the next, say, 24, 48 hours? What's the timeline? What should people kind of expect to happen over time? Is it something that gets protracted? Is it something that kind of happens fast? What would somebody expect?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think in general what people can expect is we release the initial RFC, and then generally there's a few weeks of just conversation that happens.
Right.
Sometimes we release the RFCs while we're building the actual product.
Right.
So we're maybe some number of weeks away from release. Other times we build it without even starting the product, right? So it's I would say there's just a number of weeks of conversation that happens. We go back and forth. And then if there's especially good pieces of feedback, we have meetings about it and try to decide, how do we approach this,
Let's define that for a second.
Sure.
What would you consider to be a good piece of feedback?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I think a good piece of feedback is one that has a really concrete impact in a developer's workflow in some way, where it's hey, man, this is going to really mess up my process entirely, right? And then we're we probably don't want to do that.
Right.
Or it's hey, this is going to be so amazing and so great, which we definitely appreciate that, and that gives us confidence that, hey, we're building the right product.
So to your point, on both of those reactions, someone could say, don't do this sucks. But then I feel like the great thing about it is we encourage people to then, give us the details, why do you think it's not a good idea? And then that gets to the meat of the decision-making we have. Same thing if someone just says, this is great, we shouldn't walk away and say, great, we have their approval, and we do the project. Please say this is great and tell us specifically in what scenarios it is and why. So that gives us more validation of the use cases and reasons that we may want to pursue it.
I guess that's the question is, from what you've seen in RFCs when they come in, how are people posting them that gets the most attention from you? Where you're oh no, that one.
Yeah, that's for sure. So I think a lot of the ones that we get the most attention, or that I would be wow, this is something we really, really have to consider is if a developer comes to us and says, this is not going to help me, this is going to make me have more pain, right? So for example, the rate limiting one, right? That one was a great piece because they're well, we can't really have the experience we have envisioned. We can't build that experience with these limits, right? And that forces us to be well, we really need to build something or alleviate these pains in some way.
Right.
So, I mean, when people are posting on the forum and having these conversations, are these people that have to be deeply technical? I mean, what level of What's my entry fee?
I mean, there's really no entry fee. I mean, I think some familiarity with like the extensions product is definitely beneficial, or whatever product the RFC is directed towards. I think that just having some familiarity, having some sort of background, but like you don't have to be a wizard, you know, to
to read it,
to read us
and
read it and give us feedback, right?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it's kind of important, because the problem is you'll have people who understand, like you'll have a streamer and you'll have somebody who's actually building extension, and everybody wants to kind of weigh in on it, but they may not have the technical prowess to explain what it is. But they're like, no, this sucks because I can't get this to do this thing.
Right.
You know, and, and some people may fear that, no, I'm not going to post in there, I don't want to look stupid, when that's actually critical information just because it's not in technical terms.
100% agree. I would say like there's even benefits there of like broadcasters, for example, giving us feedback of like, hey, this is going to really like, I don't want my viewers to like have this experience on my channel, right? So that's also beneficial. And broadcasters, I think, are familiar with the product but don't necessarily have that technical background, like you mentioned. So, and it's still incredibly valuable for us.
So that's the interesting thing. So the reality is that you would actually encourage broadcasters to actually go and participate in the RFCs for what is going to, you know, be with them, and not just kind of go, well, that's a tech thing, and I'm not going to play with that because all I do is, you know, make content.
Yeah, no, totally. I think a cool thing about extensions is our customers are both developers and broadcasters, right? We have this interesting overlap between the two groups, and yeah, I think it's super important for feedback from both sides.
So what is one of the, we talked about chat property, or sorry, what was it? Chat capabilities.
Chat capabilities, yep.
What is one of the latest RFCs that's come out?
Yeah, so the most recent one we released was for enabling developers to upgrade or support non-bits enabled extensions simultaneously with bits enabled extensions. So currently what you have to do is maintain two different versions of your extension. One that non-affiliates and partners can install, which does not use bits to monetize.
And the reason for that is because you have to be an affiliate or partner to take advantage of monetization.
Exactly. So in order to even install these extensions currently, you have to be an affiliate or partner, which is not great because there's a whole lot of broadcasters that aren't that, right? And we want them to enable them to have the same experiences, right? So yeah, the RFC is around enabling extension developers to have an extension that is both monetized and not monetized simultaneously, so that everyone can install your extension. And if you have bits, you can use them. If not, you don't have to.
So it's one extension you're maintaining instead of two, where it's like, I'll make the App Store analogy, where it was like my app and my app free.
Exactly.
Same thing.
Exactly.
And then once they had in-app purchases, then you can alleviate that burden.
100% agree. Yeah. So I think another thing that is really a burden for developers is they have to have two different processes for each of those extensions, and that means they have to submit different versions to the dev site and get two different versions approved if they want to release it, and that can take a long time. So definitely this is something a lot of people have been asking for, and yeah, it's coming soon.
You know, for the history of an RFC, when an RFC comes out and everybody kind of comments on it, and it's moved through its life cycle, does it kind of go into an archive area where people can read historically about it, or does it stay active? And how can I tell what's active and what's not?
Yeah, so there's not a great way to tell what's active. You can
so this
you can
is a good
go
suggestion
on,
then.
Yeah, this is a great suggestion. This is a great comment. You can go on the forums, and a lot of times we'll post like, oh, hey, this has been released. And that's kind of like as best as we do right now, which is not great, but we can definitely do better. So that's like kind of the easiest way to tell. But they are all archived on the forums, and you can even go and comment on them still. We don't like lock the threads or anything. So yeah, that's totally something people can do.
Awesome.
Well, with that, if you want to participate in our RFCs, and we certainly suggest you do that, it is at discuss.dev.twitch.tv. Look for the RFCs category, and that's where we'll post all documents about upcoming products and feedback that we're looking for. So thank you, David, for coming on.
Thank you guys so much.
Thanks, appreciate it, man.
Yeah.